Well, the winter transfer window has officially closed, and most African major leagues, I should say. So, we're going to take this opportunity to discuss some of the moves that have taken place across the continent and which sides are best geared up now to take on the interclub competitions. All of that up next on the African Five-A-Side podcast. Welcome back to the African Football Report on the African Five-A-Side podcast. I'm your host, Maher Mizahi, and this podcast is brought to you by africasaCountry.com. I enjoyed a story on africasaCountry.com this week called The Inheritance of Hope, and it really outlined how Kenyans have consistently maintained hope throughout various setbacks as they sort of try to obtain the democratic process for their country. The article will be in the description below, and I am also published this week on africasaCountry.com. I wrote about the rift between Algeria and France and the recent political tensions and how they relate back to colonial narrative, really, that perhaps the French right wing is trying to obstruct, and how that's really not letting both countries move on. So if you're interested in that, like I said, the description below will have both links to those two articles. I highly recommend you go check it out. So getting on to the episode, we are going to look at mostly the CAF Champions League teams, what they needed going into the transfer window, and then did they fulfill those needs? Did they go out and satisfy those needs and buy the players that they needed to go on and put out a serious to seriously compete for the titles that they're competing for. And then after that, we're going to quickly touch on maybe some of the biggest transfers in the European leagues that African internationals managed to make and what that means for the national teams as well. So starting with the CAF Champions League, my preseason pick to win this competition, and it's one that I maintain, I think, is Esperance de Tunis. But they needed a few pieces going into this winter transfer window. They needed a center half because their captain and center half, Yassine Meriah, picked up a knee ligament injury early in the year. And since then, he was ruled out for the rest of the year. Now, they do have another center half named Mohamed Amin Tougai from Algeria. He's a full international, a good player for the CAF Champions League. But they don't really have a third center half, in my opinion, that is on the level of those two. They've been using a guy named Hamza Jalasi, who is experienced, who has done a job at times, has looked okay, but at other times has looked out of his depth. And that's one of those where you don't really want to put your entire season and your hopes on a player that could be inconsistent. So I thought they needed a center half because besides Hamza Jalasi, because one time Mohamed Amin Tougai picked up an injury, they were using fullbacks, bringing them in, putting them in central defense. The other position of need, in my opinion, for Esperance de Tunis was probably a striker. Now, they have Rodrigo Rodriguez, of course. They can play sometimes with a false nine like a Yusuf Belali or Elias Makwana or even Yan Sassi, the Brazilian winger. But I thought they just needed another target man in case the Brazilian striker Rodrigo Rodriguez wasn't available to play. And this year he's had various problems and he hasn't really been on the pitch consistently. So, did they fulfill those needs of center half and striker? For striker, they brought in Ashraf Ben Jibri off of a loan. So this was a player that belonged to Esperance de Tunis, and they brought him back really in the middle of the transfer window or just before it opened. He had scored, I think, 4 goals in 13 matches on loan. I forget the club that he was on loan at. I think it was Jargish, I think. But as soon as he came back to Esperance, he's been on fire. He scored a hat-trick in his first match in the CAF Champions League. In the sixth and final match, I believe it was against Sagrada Esperanza, I believe. And then in the league now, he's also scored a goal and provided a few assists. So he's not the biggest target man. He's not like like going back to pirate strikers like Mabasa or Makopa, a big tall player that can hold up play. He's more of like a shorter player, but nifty, good movement in and around the box. Obviously, he's not like Sergio Aguero, but that's who maybe a stylistic comparison could be. A little bit taller, but a player that I think is really nifty and can be a killer in the box as well. So I like that move to bring him back off of loan, and I think he could probably do a job for Esperance this year in the CAF Champions League. They also brought in Elias Bouzeyan, who's a right back, so not really a center half, but they brought in a right back. He also played in the CAF Champions League in the sixth and final match day, and he had an assist, and he seems to be a decent player as well. They brought in Abu Bakar Diakite from Mali, from Joliba. Remember, Joliba played with a bunch of young players, and one of those young players was Abu Bakar Diakite, who Esperance Tunis brought in. And Diakite has played one match now, just last week, and he wasn't really impressive in that one. Esperance won 3-2, but he missed a few clear-cut chances. But he's only 18 years old, so he has a lot of time to sort of grow into his role. But I said they needed a striker in the center half. He's a striker, but I don't think he's somebody that can improve Esperance Tunis right away. This is a purchase that was made for the next 2 or 3 years. They also brought in a winger named Mohamed Mouhli, a Tunisian winger, and here's a move that I don't really understand because you have Yan Sassi, the Brazilian, you have Elias Mokwana, you have Youssef Belaili, you have the youngster Kusay Maasha. I don't really see where this Tunisian winger that you guys brought in, Mouhli, is really going to be able to make a difference. So overall, I would give Esperance Tunis maybe 7.5 out of 10 for their transfer window. They didn't bring in an experienced striker, but they brought in somebody that can contribute, and they didn't bring in a center half really to replace Yassine Meriah. I think they're really going to be relying on Mohamed Amin Touga and Hamza Jalasi, and then also maybe some of these fullbacks to come in and do a job in the center of the pitch. So I just would have loved to see them bring in one well-known, experienced center half on the African continent. I think that would have been uh, great for them, and I would have probably bumped this up to 9 or 9.5 out of 10. MC of Algiers. Their problem is that they play great defensively, but they don't score a lot of goals. And this is a problem not just for MC of Algiers, this is a problem for most Algerian clubs. I was looking at the league table prior to recording this episode, and I saw that I think only two Algerian clubs have scored more goals than matches they played in, which is crazy. So if, for example, MC of Algiers played in 16 matches, they'll have only scored 15 goals or 16 goals. And they only conceded 7 goals this year. I think 8 now, because they just played yesterday or 2 days ago and they conceded another one. But 8 goals in 15 or 16 matches, something like that. So defensively, they are great both in the league and the Champions League, but they haven't scored enough goals. So they needed strikers. And they didn't really bring in anyone. They just brought in an attacking midfielder really at the deadline at midnight. Mehdi Boussaid, I believe his name is, but he's a player that hasn't been playing for the last 9 months or so. He was supposed to be playing in the Emirates, but something happened. His contract got ruptured. Uh, 18 months ago, or two, yeah, or almost a year ago, he was playing in the second division in France, and he scored 11 goals there. So he can, I think, when put in the right conditions, contribute and score some goals from an attacking midfield point of view. But he's not a striker. Um, and I don't know if he's somebody that you can rely on. He played in Algeria in 2014-15 and he didn't do anything. So, we saw with Andy Delors, the striker that Algeria brought in, former Nice, former Montpellier, Nantes, etc., one of the most consistent strikers in French football for the last 10 years. He wasn't able to do anything in Algeria. And even with Al Ahly brought in Anthony Modeste, who was banging in goals for Borussia Dortmund, and he comes to the Egyptian Premier League and it's not the same thing. Sometimes it's not about the level of play, it's about can the player adapt to the style of play. And so I'm not sure about Mehdi Boussaid. I don't think he's somebody that Mouloudia of Algiers are going to be able to rely on. And they got rid of Andy Delors and Adil Ghanem. And so they lose a striker. One of their other strikers, Zakaria Naiji, picked up a long-term injury as well. And they just refuse to sign any other attacking midfielders or wingers or strikers. And I think this is going to be an issue for them. I think if MC of Algiers are going to win the CAF Champions League, they're going to have to go 0-0, 0-0, 0-0, 0-0, 1-0, win on penalty shots. Um, I I I don't understand like this transfer window at all. So they're not going to be a fun team, I think, to watch in the second half of the season. I think they're really, really going to be relying on their defensive strengths. Even though under new coach Khalid bin Yahya, they've been scoring more goals, but these still aren't at the level that I think I want them to be at. Otherwise, we have Mamelodi Sundowns. Pretty complete team when you look at it, right? They didn't really need to strengthen any areas urgently, in my opinion. Um, I was thinking maybe center half, maybe central midfield, and that's exactly what they end up doing. They bring in Jaden Adams, Lucas Suarez, and Keanu Cupido. But really, the main transfer for me is Jaden Adams. Um, because Sundowns, like I said, they had a good midfield, right? You look at mostly this year, they've been playing with Mokoena, Obas, and Marcelo Allende. No real weaknesses there. Um, but Jaden Adams, for me, what he does so well is he's one of those players that is good defensively and good in attack. Like when you look at, for example, Obas, I don't really know how much he contributes to the attacking, constructing plays or moving forward. But Jaden Adams can do everything. And he has a very high motor. He can help, recover the ball in midfield, intercept the ball, pass the ball, and then go score a goal as well. And so really him next to Mokoena and Allende, I think is going to be I think that probably makes him the best midfielder on the African continent. So I love the signing. The fact that initially we thought he was going to be cup tied because he played with Stellenbosch in the CAF Confederation Cup, but then CAF changed its ruling so that he can now be registered to play in the CAF Champions League. They're not saying no players will be cup tied. This could be the move that Sundowns needed to win this competition. And Sundowns, I'm just going to say a quick word on them because I think at the beginning of the year, with the firing of the coach, with Ronani leaving, the not so impressive appearances in the CAF Champions League at times, I think in my head I sort of wrote them off. Like that's it. The page has been turned. I don't think they're going to be able to play at the level that they've played at in previous seasons. But when you see the consistency with which they've been winning matches in the PSL, when you think about the fact that even in the CAF Champions League they haven't been horrible, when you think about the fact that Cardoso is new there, and he's still building. And then they make smart additions like this. I think I wrote them off a little bit. Unconsciously, I wrote them off, but I think I wrote them off way too prematurely. Sundowns still command and deserve our respect, in my opinion. It should still be top three favorite in the CAF Champions League. After Sundowns, I'm going to look at Al Ahly. Al Ahly needed a lot because they've been dealing with a lot of injuries, and they sold some players. So Percy Tau goes to Qatar, right? He's playing in Qatar now. Kahraba goes out on loan, the player that could play as a winger and as a makeshift striker as well. Ali Ma'aloul, your long-time beloved Tunisian fullback. I think he's been at the club for 8 or 9 years. He picked up an Achilles injury in the CAF Champions League final last year. And Achilles injury is very, very tough. When you rupture that ligament, you're out for minimum 8 or 9 months, but probably more. Uh, he also leaves the club. Ahmed Kandusi goes out on loan. We don't really care. He was never a big piece at Al Ahly anyways. So you're losing four players. A lot of your other players have been struggling with nagging injuries throughout the entire year. And you really need, in my opinion, at wingers and attacking midfielders. That's really where Al Ahly needs something here to replace like your Percy Tau and your Kahraba and so on and so forth, Ahmed Abdel Qadir and so on. So they bring in Ashraf bin Sharqi. Ashraf bin Sharqi is a Moroccan player that has been useful in these CAF Interclub competitions, either with Zamalek or during his time with Wydad Casablanca. He's won trophies in the Interclub competitions, and then he went to the Middle East, and now he's back. And I just don't know if he's as hungry as he was before. I don't know if he's in his prime. I don't. Even most Al Ahly fans, I think, were under the impression like this is a signing that would have made sense like 2, 3 years ago, not right now. They think he's probably over the hill. They sign a striker. Remember, they have the Palestinian striker Wissam Abu Ali, but nobody really behind him as a target man. They go and they sign a Slovenian international, and this could be another interesting signing. His name is Nate Gradishar. They signed him for I think €1 million, and he has one cap for Slovenia earlier on, or about a year ago, at the beginning of 2024. He's scored goals at a decent level in Europe. But it's the same thing that we were talking about with Anthony Modeste and Andy Delort. This could be a really cool signing and it could work out. And I think it's great to see African clubs sign European players because usually it's always the inverse, right? So we're sort of flipping the tables and changing perspectives about African football. But like I said about those other European players like Modeste and Delort that have played their whole careers in Europe, once you come and play, it's different. It's not about is he good enough? It's about can he adapt to the style of play. Like playing in Algeria is I mean the physicality, the diving, the defensive duties that you have to fulfill one on one every single. It's a very defensive league, so I don't understand as a striker why you would ever sign in Algeria. And then he's going to Egypt, where I mean, theoretically he should be scoring goals because Al Ahly are much better than two-thirds of the Egyptian Premier League. Um, but the pressure that comes with playing at a club like Al Ahly, they don't care that you're Slovenian and that you're a Slovenian international. It's like, what can you do for the club if you're not good enough, or if you're not getting results quickly? That's the problem with playing at a club like Al Ahly. The pressure is it arrives very quickly. They don't have the time to be patient with you. So if you're not productive almost immediately, you could be in a lot of trouble. So we'll see. We'll see how this signing goes. But this is an interesting one at least. And then they signed two other players, Ahmed Elida, Mustafa Al. I think overall, Al Ahly fans were disappointed with their transfer window. I don't think they were able to replenish what they lost overall over the last, not just this window, but even in the summer with um, a few of the players that they lost then. And as I wrote Sundowns off in my head, I think I also wrote Al Ahly off. But that's one that I think I'm going to stick with. I don't think Al Ahly are going to be winning the CAF Champions League again. ISFAR had a much more quiet transfer window. They're one of their best center halves, Asaubi, picked up an injury. And so I think they have a Congolese defender, Inonga. They've been playing sometimes with what's his name? Akram Nakash, who can sort of play as like a left back, left center back. He's been playing as well. Uh, so they have like players to play in those positions, but I think they just wanted to reinforce the center back position and the defensive midfield position, because even their defensive midfielders, Mohamed Rabi Halimat, who I had in the CAF Champions League team of the round, and Arabi Naji, are both 34 years old. So I think what they did is they made a very intelligent purchase. They went and they brought Falou Mendy, who was playing in Tunisia, playing well in the Tunisian league, former player that played for Tengueth, that impressive Senegalese team that made a decent run in the CAF Interclub competitions. And he's really a center half, but that can play in defensive midfield. So they hit two birds with one stone. I think this was a very intelligent, very smart signing. And I think it's exactly what they needed just to shore up and give them a little bit of depth going into the knockout stages. Uh, they had their second goalkeeper, Mahdi bin Abid, go to Wydad Casablanca, but they won't be too, I mean, too obviously, it's good to have a great experienced goalkeeper, a goalkeeper that's played, I think, for the African Nations Championship team behind you. But they have Ayoub Al Khayati, who's been one of the best goalkeepers in the CAF Champions League. So I don't think they're going to be too gutted about losing Al Mahdi bin Abid. Or Mahmoud bin Halib, another player that's, has a lot of experience, one of the better players in the Moroccan league during his time, but that's just maybe getting on now and a little bit older. I couldn't find any information about Al Hilal, really. I think Serge Poku, one of the wingers that they got from Azak Mimosa, who was a goal scoring threat when he was with Azak Mimosa, but I don't think he's been able to play much at Al Hilal, probably because I mean, just their wingers, their young, impressive wingers, Giro Migisha and Koulibaly, have just probably. I don't think they expected those young players to make such a quick impact immediately, and they probably took too much playing time away from him. So I think he went out on loan, and I don't think they brought anyone in. I couldn't find any information about that, anyways. And finally, Orlando Pirates didn't really bring in anybody. Gilberto, the Angolan winger, Katleko Tladisa, Sandilim Tetwa out. I mean, I don't think Pirates needed to fulfill any positions of need, really. I think it would be nice to have Salang back. But besides that, once if he does come back pretty soon, I don't think Pirates needed to sign anybody. It's not good to sign somebody just to sign somebody, just to say we made a signing in this transfer window. And I think that's a sign of strength. If your club doesn't sign any players, that means you're in a good place. And Pirates are obviously in a good place. Let's talk about the European players now. The biggest signing for African internationals or African players this window has been Omar Marmoush, the Egyptian forward that was playing at Eintracht Frankfurt, Egyptian international, who signs to Manchester City, I think for 60 million euros or 60 million pounds. Now, the Marmoush signing was interesting for a few reasons. First of all, it confirms that he's at that level, because he's been banging in goal after goal after goal, and he's probably been, for my money, the best player in the Bundesliga over the last year or so. Um, but it's one thing doing it. I don't know. Even in the Bundesliga, sometimes you can see players that score a goal a game, and then they still don't get the respect. Like I'm thinking about Anthony Modeste, somebody like that. We're still not sure that they're on that level. But just you get some reassurance when you see Pep Guardiola say, "Yeah, that guy's class." Um, but the thing about Marmoush now that I'm wondering is where's he going to fit in at City? Because obviously he's not going to play as a striker. They have Erling Haaland, so he's probably going to play in that inside left position, right? That we saw him. I saw him play there against Arsenal. And it's kind of like Mohamed Salah's position that's sort of like on the inside right? So it's they're on the wing, but they're not really wingers or wingers that are going to track back and do heavy defensive work. They're more wingers that are going to play off of the striker, maybe get played in behind the defensive lines and score goals. My only thing from when I look at the Egyptian national team is okay, so if you have Marmoush, Salah, and then let's throw a striker there. Let's say Mustafa Mohamed from Nantes, good striker playing in the French league, a lot of experience, etc. That's three very attacking players, ultra attacking players that are probably not going to do a lot of defensive work. That means your midfield three, you shouldn't really have to worry about them being too creative. You're probably gonna have Marwan Atiyah so he can play those deep passes. But that means the rest of your midfield, they have a lot of pressure, and the defense has a lot of pressure to make sure that they're fulfilling their defensive duties and they're not being caught out. And even like your fullbacks probably shouldn't be too attacking. I just worry about like having three players like that at the top, not play any defense. It's something that I think we've seen in the past, like when there was Messi, Neymar, Suarez, for example. But Suarez used to track back a little bit. Or now, and sometimes when I watch Madrid, it's Vinicius, he runs back a bit. But Mbappe, for example, or PSG, Neymar, Messi, Mbappe. Those guys, it was like PSG were always defending with seven players. They were never defending with more than seven players. So I wonder if that's a winning recipe for Egypt. I mean, a solution there could be to have Marmoush play as a striker, but can he play as a striker? I'd like to see him maybe try that at City. Um, but yeah, these are the questions that I'm thinking about tactically. But good for Marmoush, good for African football to have another high-profile player like that in the Premier League at a club like Manchester City. I hope he's able to knock in the goals. And the last thing I'll say about Marmoush, sorry about take speaking so long about him, but I remember watching him initially for Stuttgart when he first, I mean, before then he was playing for St. Pauli on loan, I think. But then he went to Stuttgart. And I remember watching a player that was okay. I never, I sort of pride myself on looking at young players sometimes and saying, oh, he's talented, he has the potential to go far. Marmoush wasn't a player that I watched at Stuttgart and said, he's going to be signing for Manchester City one day. I thought he could be a decent player for the Egyptian national team and contribute. But the way he's developed and continued to develop year in, year out is very encouraging because that was one of the biggest problems with the Egyptian players for the longest period of time was that I would say that more talented players, young players, went to Europe at younger ages at times. And the mentality, the professionalism, that thing of improving year in, year out, many, 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 many players failed to do that over a long period of time. And so Mohamed Salah was really the one that broke the glass ceiling on that and proved that Egyptian players can be professional in Europe. But Marmoush has done that as well. I think he looks way fitter. He was younger and he was fatter, in my opinion. You look at him now, he's like in great shape. That means he's taking his nutrition seriously. He's taking his physical fitness seriously. The way he's managed to finish in front of goal, he wasn't finishing like that when he was like 19, 20. He's obviously put in the work to be able to finish in front of goal the way he has now. His free kicks, that's something that he added to his arsenal as well. So I love seeing players continuously improve. We assume that that's going to happen, right? But it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have young players that I spoke about this recently on the podcast on the BBC. We think that all players' careers are a bell curve like this. You start when you're young, you improve, you hit your prime, and then you go down towards the end when you age. But that's not necessarily the case. Look at Marcus Rashford. Look at there's many players I can think of like Nabil Ben Taleb. I could think of Deli Ali, for example. They start when they're young like this, and then you think they're just going to become world class, but something happens. It can be injury, it can be mental health, it can be distractions, it can be any sort of thing, and their career just goes, it just dips. And vice versa as well. You can have players that don't really pop until they're 24, 25, 26 years old, and then they're late bloomers, like N'Golo Kante, Olivier Giroud, etc. So for Marmoush, hats off. I really, really, like I said, respect players that improve year in, year out, and I prove that and I think he's done that, and I'm excited to see how he can further improve in the years coming ahead. Elsewhere in the Premier League, Wolverhampton Wanderers have become Africa FC. They already have some African players, but they brought in Marshall Munetsi from Zimbabwe. They brought in Emmanuel Agbadou from Cote d'Ivoire and Nasser Jiga from Burkina Faso. Now, Marshall Munetsi, for those that don't know, he's been you guys, if there's many South Africans watching this, you probably will know because he played in PSL. But he's been playing in France, and in France, he's been a very consistent performer for his club Stade Reims, even though it's like an unglamorous club. The one thing I would say about Munetsi from people that I know that know him, they talk about somebody that is just one of the best human beings in football. Just very nice, does a lot of charity work. In fact, with his previous club, Stade Reims, I was told that he has something in his contract where for every kilometer that he runs, his club had to donate a certain amount to his charity in Zimbabwe. I'm gonna look up for the exact details and maybe pop it on the screen right now, but I think it was for every kilometer, 500 euros or something like that. And he would run, 10, 11, 12, 13 kilometers a game. And so that's really part of his strength is that he's good tactically disciplined. He'll put in the miles or the kilometers. He's going to run all over the pitch, recover the ball, and recycle play, give it to more attacking players or more creative players in front of him. So, fully deserved move to Wolverhampton Wanderers. I think he's going to give them a lot in midfield. Agbadu is one of those late bloomers, came out of San Pedro in Cote d'Ivoire, late, not at the age of 16, 17, 18. And he's powerful. I think he's still like a very sober, consistent. And he also comes from Stade Reims, the same club as Monetsi. But he's just a very solid center half. He's not spectacular anywhere, but he's good everywhere. He's good in the air. He can distribute the ball with his feet as well. Good in the tackle. He's just not spectacular. It's one of those players where he's going to do the job against 90% or 95% of strikers, in my opinion. But if he comes up against Victor Osimhen or Erling Haaland, I don't know if he can meet them at that level all the time. But good signing as well for Wolves. And then finally, Nasser Jiga, and he has more potential than Agbadu, in my opinion. He's younger than Agbadu, but he's probably not as polished as Agbadu. But physically, he's explosive. He's powerful. A lot of speed, a lot of strength. He has that sort of wild side about him that sometimes you need center halves to have, like a Gabriel at Arsenal or like I don't know Pepe from Real Madrid back in the day. But I just love the move for Giga and Burkina Faso because when I look at their defense now, look at their center halves. Edmund Tapsoba, one of the best African players on the continent, Bayer Leverkusen center half. Isufu Dayo, one of the best players playing on the African continent at RS Berkane, the captain there for the last 6, 7, 8 years. Uh, Very experienced center half. Those were your starting two. But then you also have Adamo Nagalo, very highly rated 22, 23-year-old center half, playing, UEFA Europa League football. And then you have Nasser Jiga now signing for Wolverhampton Wanderers. And it makes me think if I was the coach of Burkina Faso, I would probably play with three center halves, where you have, or you can even play a back four. This is what like Arsenal and Manchester City have been doing now. They play with a back four, but of the back four, three are center halves, and then the other one is like an ultra attacking fullback. So think about like Vardiol plays that role. He's sort of as a left back, but not really. He's more of like a center back. And then you have, I don't know who else they played, Akanji and whatever. Those are your three sort of defenders, and then Mateus Nunes will go that way, or Arsenal will do it with, I guess Timber counts as the auxiliary center half, and then you have the other two, Saliba and Gabriel, and then Lewis Skelly is like sort of like go if you want to go. I think they can do this. Like they can play Adayo, Tapsoba, and either Giga or Nagalo, and then they can send Issa Kabore, the right wing back from Manchester City Academy and everything. His strength is to bomb down the pitch with his speed. You can send him. So I really like what Burkina have if they manage to work it out tactically. Other than that, two Nigerians made decent moves, Omar Sadiq and Akor Adams in the Spanish Liga. Two players that have flashed at times with Montpellier, with Omar Sadiq all over Spain, really. But haven't really been able to play at a high level consistently. I think they signed to Valencia and Sevilla, two clubs with huge platforms. What I want to see out of both of them is to have a full season. Like Akradam, score more than 20 goals, score a goal every other game, for example. Umar Sadiq, get more than 15 assists or 12 assists, for example. Prove that you can be a consistent winger. There's a lot of talented wingers for the Nigerian national team. Prove the consistency. Finally, the last move really that I wanted to touch on was Adam Asnou also goes from Bayern Munich to Real Valladolid, I believe. He's a Moroccan left back, very highly rated at Bayern Munich and with the Moroccan national team. But my issue with him is it's not my issue, sorry. I just want to see him grow. Like, can he be that player for Bayern Munich? Or is he just like was a cool youth player for Bayern Munich and but he's not at that level. He's just going to be a solid left back. Because if Morocco can find a left back, they have Ashraf Hakimi as a right back obviously. If they can find a left back, they can liberate Nusayr Mazraoui because Nusayr Mazraoui, the Manchester United sort of fullback, he can play the left back position. He can play the right back position. But in my opinion, like it would be great to have him play defensive midfield. Like put him in central midfield. He just his intelligence, his tactical discipline, his technical ability, his passing ability. I think he would be best in a midfield role. So if they can find a left back, they can liberate Mazraoui to go move into midfield because I think Sofiane Amrabat, for example, is probably not the player that we thought he was, and I think Mazraoui could, in my opinion, work pretty well in that sixth position in front of the defense. Two African players that I was disappointed didn't really get a move. People keep asking me about Victor Osimhen, and then why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? Why isn't it? But I think when he signed for a loan, I mean, at the beginning of the year, I think he was planning on being in Turkey for the entire year. But people keep asking me like he's been playing at a top level for 3 years now, and he still hasn't been able to get that top move. Why? And I don't know. I mean, if any Nigerians are watching, please do let me know. I think Osimhen can rub people the wrong way at times. This is something I picked up from journalists that were watching him play at the AFCON. They're saying, "Why is he yelling at his teammates so much?" And I was saying, like, no, that's how passionate he is, right? And he spoke about it himself, like, no, like if I'm yelling at a player to make a good pass, that's because like we need to, we need to score a goal as a team. And when it's not me yelling at them, it's like his passion to win, to for excellence that's coming out. But I wonder if that rubs people the wrong way sometimes. He can be a little bit abrasive as a character. Um, I think Napoli are probably difficult to negotiate with. They never sell a player under their value. Because similar to Olympique de Lyon, they would rather hold on to the player and the player decrease in value, and then they let them go rather than, have another club take a bargain on them. So I think Napoli were probably also problematic here. But I want to see Osimhen make that move to Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, Arsenal, something like that. He deserves it, in my opinion. And the other one is Chancel Mbemba, another player that was on the list of African Player of the Year. Didn't play a single minute at Marseille, um, where he fell out with the administration, and oh, I forgot a few players, sorry. So he fell out with the administration, Mehdi Benatia, and the president, Pablo Longoria, and everything. And as a result, he hasn't really played a single minute. And I thought for sure he would be leaving in the winter, but I guess something happened. He wasn't able to move. He will be out of a contract this summer, so he will be changing clubs and playing football again this summer. But not playing football for 1 year, more than 1 year now. It's I don't know if he'll ever be able to recover from that and be at the level that he was, because he was playing at a very, very high level prior to the beginning of this season. Sorry, just very quickly, I forgot to touch on the French league transfers. Seko Fofana from Cote d'Ivoire goes from Saudi Arabia after 18 months back to Rennes in France, which I think is good because Cote d'Ivoire haven't really been able to find a replacement for him in midfield. It was Frank Kessié, Seko Fofana, and Ibrahim Sangare at the AFCON. It's still mostly been Frank Kessié and Seko Fofana. They've tried to play with Jean Udes Aoulou. They've tried to play with Mario Dorgeles, one experienced player, one young player in midfield. Or they've tried to even play with a 4-2-3-1, so they don't have to play with three players in midfield. But they haven't really been able to replace the engine, the motor, the attacking output that Seko Fofana has. So for him to go back to Rennes in France, where he played at his highest level of football in France, I think that's good news for Cote d'Ivoire. just 10 months out from the African Cup of Nations. And then finally, two Algerian internationals go to Marseille, Amin Gouiri and Ismail Ben Nasser. Amin Gouiri, I asked myself the same tactical questions as I do with Omar Marmoush. Like, is he best as an inside left? Can he play as a striker by himself as a number nine? I don't know. And then same thing, my challenge to him is the same challenge that I gave to the Nigerians, is like, get back to that level where you're scoring 20 goals a season. Be consistent. And then you can prove that you can lead the line for the Algerian national team. And then Ismail Benassa is just about getting healthy. Like, play every single game from now until the end of the season. That would be great. And then you could start to refine your form, you refine your class, um, and be the best player in the Algerian national team as you were when they won the AFCON in 2019. So, yeah, that those are two big moves for Marseille and for the Algerian community in Marseille, which is absolutely massive, of course. So I'm definitely going to be watching those two very, very closely. So yeah, this was our mega transfer episode extraordinaire. If you are a fan of the CAF Champions League teams, let me know if you're happy with your team's transfer window. If you're a fan of these other African internationals playing in Europe, let me know what you think of their moves as well. Some big matches coming up this weekend in the African football sphere. We have, of course, Mamelodi Sundowns against Orlando Pirates, the biggest match of the season so far in the PSL. We also have Stade Tunisien against Esperance Tunis. Two out of the top three sides in the Tunisian league, they're playing as well. I think maybe we're going to cover both those teams after they play this weekend. But until then, keep it locked on the African Five Side Podcast. Peace.